My name is Brenda Collins, and for most of my life, I believed that family was the one thing that would never break. I grew up in a modest but warm house on Linden Street in Fairfield, Colorado, a quiet place where the mountains stood tall like old guardians and the air smelled of pine in every season. Our house had pale yellow walls, a green roof that always needed repainting, and a long porch where my brother Nathan and I used to sit and plan our futures. Back then, it felt like nothing could push us apart. But life changes people. Sometimes it changes them gently, and sometimes it tears them away from you without warning, like a sudden windstorm. On the morning of Nathan's wedding, the sky over Fairfield was bright and clear, the kind of sky that makes everything seem hopeful. I woke up early, showered, and chose a pale blue dress I had bought during a short work trip to London for around $300. I had bought it without even trying it on, trusting the soft color and simple shape to fit me well. When I put it on, it made me feel calm, like maybe the tension between Nathan and me would fade once the wedding celebration began. I even curled my hair and wore a silver necklace I bought from a boutique in Brighton, just for a touch of confidence. I wanted to look nice, not for attention, but because it was my brother's big day. A few days earlier, Nathan and I argued about something that should have never mattered: money. He asked me for $12,000 to cover the last part of his wedding expenses, decorations, a last-minute upgrade to the venue, and a honeymoon deposit. I had helped him financially more times than I could count, and I didn't see why I needed to fund his wedding too. I told him no, gently at first, and then more firmly when he became angry. At the time, I thought it was just a disagreement. Families fight, then they forgive. I never imagined it would turn into something so serious. When I reached the church, a beautiful white building with tall windows and long wooden doors, I felt nervous but hopeful. I walked up the stone path slowly, breathing in the fresh Colorado air. Guests stood around the entrance, chatting softly, dressed in their brightest clothes. I smiled at a few familiar faces as I passed. Everything looked perfect. But as I stepped closer to the entrance, I saw my brother standing beside his fiancée, Claire Watkins, and my parents, my mother, Julie, and my father, Richard. They stood arranged almost like a wall. Nathan wasn't smiling. Claire wasn't smiling. Even my parents looked uneasy. Nathan's eyes locked on me in a way that made my stomach twist. There was no warmth, no brotherly affection. Just cold judgment. Before I could greet anyone, he lifted his hand and pointed directly at me, as if he were identifying a stranger who didn't belong there. "I don't want her inside," he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "She refused to help, so she can leave." For a moment, I couldn't process the words. The world around me went strangely quiet, even though I could still see people moving and hear distant chatter. Everything felt far away, like my brain needed time to catch up. I tried to speak, but my voice wouldn't come out. My mother stepped toward me, her expression tight with embarrassment. "Brenda, please," she whispered, her voice thin and shaky. "Just go home. Don't make a scene." "This is his day?" Her words hit harder than Nathan's, my own mother asking me to leave. My own family pushing me away as if I had done something unforgivable. I looked from her to my father, hoping he would defend me, but he only stared at the ground, avoiding my eyes entirely. His silence was the knife that finished the cut. All the memories of supporting Nathan over the years rushed back to me like a flood. The nights I stayed up helping him write job applications. The money I lent him when he couldn't pay rent in Bristol, England. The dozens of favors I did without ever complaining. The times he told me I was too quiet or too serious, but still called me whenever he needed help. I had never thought he would repay me with humiliation. My hands began to shake, and I pressed them together to steady myself. I could feel the eyes of other guests on me. Some looked confused, others looked uncomfortable. A few looked curious in the worst way, but not one person defended me. Not my family, not my friends, no one. I swallowed hard and forced my voice to stay calm. "Nathan," I said quietly, "I'm your sister. I came here to support you." He turned away from me as if my words meant nothing. Claire crossed her arms and looked at me with annoyance. "We asked you for help and you refused," she said. "It's better if you're not part of the ceremony. It's stressful enough." I stared at her, wondering how a person who barely knew me could decide I wasn't worthy of being at my own brother's wedding. I wasn't angry yet. I was too stunned for that. But hurt settled in my chest like a stone. I took a step back, then another. My heels clicked softly on the stone, echoing in my ears. My heart felt heavy, but I didn't cry, not a single tear. Crying would have meant they had broken me. They hadn't, not yet. I lifted my chin, looked at all four of them, my brother, his fiancée, my mother, and my father, and said, "All right, I'll go." Then I turned, walked back down the path, and left the wedding behind me. As I reached my car, I unlocked the door with shaking hands. I sat inside for several minutes, staring at the steering wheel, my breath shallow and uneven. The hurt was deep, sharper than I expected. But beneath it, hidden like a small flame, was something else, a quiet, steady strength. They had no idea who I had become. They had no idea what I truly did for a living. They had no idea that the next time we met, everything would change. They threw me out of the wedding, but they didn't know. I was the one who signed Nathan's paychecks. The day they pushed me away was the day I realized something important. Family may not always stand by you, but your dignity must always stand with you. When I drove home after being pushed out of Nathan's wedding, I felt something shifting inside me, something that had been quiet for years. It wasn't anger, not fully. It was more like a door opening inside my mind, letting in a truth I had kept hidden even from myself. My family didn't know me. They didn't truly see me. They didn't understand who I had become or the life I had built with my own hands. And for some reason, I had allowed that. I had shrunk myself to give them comfort. I had dimmed my own light so theirs could shine brighter. But that morning, standing outside the church like an unwanted guest, I realized that hiding had never protected me. It had only made it easier for them to underestimate me. Most people in my family believed I worked as a tech assistant, someone who typed notes for engineers or ordered equipment or helped other people succeed. The truth was far bigger and far more complicated. I let them think that because peace always felt better than conflict. I was tired of arguments, tired of proving myself, tired of explaining technology, business, or leadership to people who never truly listened. So I kept things simple when they asked about my job. I told them I worked in tech. That was the truth, just not the full truth. The reality was that I owned Ethermind Systems, an AI development company headquartered in Portland, Oregon, in a glass building called Ether Tower that overlooked the Willamette River. I started the company with nothing but a laptop, a rented co-working desk, and $400 saved from part-time jobs I worked as a teenager. In the early days, I worked late at night, writing code until my eyes burned. I spent weekends in airports traveling to meet people in Boston, Chicago, and Munich, anyone who would listen to my ideas about the future of intelligent systems. Years later, Ethermind was worth millions of dollars with clients across North America and Europe. We created learning algorithms for hospitals, voice systems for private companies, and internal tools for government offices. Most of my employees didn't even know I was the founder. They thought I was a senior director or consultant who worked quietly behind the scenes. I liked it that way. I liked walking through the hallways without being treated like royalty. I liked being the mystery woman in the corner office on the 21st floor. Only a few trusted people knew the truth: my legal advisor, our financial controller, and my HR director, Michael Grant, a calm man with sharp instincts. Michael was one of the first people I hired when the company began to grow. He was steady, professional, and loyal to the mission. He was also the only person who knew the full story of how my brother, Nathan, ended up working for us. About a year before the wedding, Nathan called me in a panic.
He had spent almost all his savings on a move to Bristol, England,
planning to live there for a year while he found himself, but the plan collapsed within months. He lost money on rent, flights, and a failed business attempt with a friend. When he called, he sounded broken, the way he used to sound when he was a child and had fallen off his bike. "Brenda, please. Can you help me find a job?" he said. "Just until I get back on my feet." And like every time before, I said yes. I told him to send me his resume, and when I received it, I noticed it was full of mistakes, dates mixed up, skills exaggerated, descriptions copied from the internet. I stayed up until midnight fixing it. Then I spent the next week training him over video calls, teaching him how to present himself, how to answer interview questions, how to speak professionally. He never thanked me, not really. He just accepted my help the way someone accepts oxygen without acknowledging where it comes from. When he landed in Portland again, he felt defeated, embarrassed, and nervous about starting over. I didn't want him to feel small, so I told Michael, hire him, but make it seem normal. He cannot know I was involved. I didn't want Nathan to feel like a charity case. I didn't want him to think he owed me anything. I wanted him to feel proud again, even if it meant hiding the truth. Michael reviewed Nathan's resume and interviewed him officially. It wasn't a fake interview. Michael was honest and direct, but he was gentle too. He asked Nathan about his skills, his failures, and his goals. Nathan spoke as if he were applying for the most important job of his life. In the end, Michael said, "I'll bring you aboard." And just like that, Nathan earned a position at Ethermind making $85,000 a year. He called our parents that night, bragging about the offer, telling them how talented he was and how companies loved him. I listened quietly as they celebrated him, praised him, and lifted him up like he was a miracle worker. They didn't ask how I was doing. They didn't ask what I was working on. They didn't ask if I needed help, but that was normal. In our family, Nathan was the golden child, the pride of the Collins household. And I was the quiet one, the reliable one. The one who handled problems without making noise. The one who nobody worried about because they assumed I was fine. Their assumptions became a mask I learned to wear. But the deeper truth was that I liked the privacy. I liked building my company away from their opinions and judgments. I liked controlling my own world without outside interference. My success was mine alone, earned not through praise or attention, but through silence, patience, and long nights when no one believed in me except myself. Still, I never expected that helping Nathan would twist itself back into my life the way it eventually did. I never thought the man I had supported so many times would become the same, one who pointed at me and told me I wasn't welcome at his wedding. And I certainly never imagined that the next day he would walk into my office, pale and trembling, facing a reality he never saw coming. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if I protected him too much. Maybe if he had struggled more, he would have learned to appreciate the people who stood by him. Maybe if I had told him the truth sooner that I was the one who signed his paychecks, he would have treated me differently. But I chose silence. I chose privacy. And now that silence was cracking open. The day after the wedding, when I walked into Ether Tower and sat in my office on the 21st floor, I felt a storm gathering in the air. Not a violent one, but a quiet, powerful one. The truth was finally on its way. The morning after Nathan's wedding felt strangely calm, almost unreal. The sun was rising over Portland, washing Ether Tower in pale gold, and I stood in front of my wardrobe picking out a gray suit that made me feel steady and grounded. I needed that feeling. My emotions from the previous day were still raw hurt, disbelief, and a quiet strength that had grown inside me overnight. My family had pushed me aside as if I meant nothing, but today the balance of truth would shift. Today I would claim the authority I had earned, an authority I had hidden for years out of love and fear of conflict. But not anymore, not after what they did. When I reached Ether Tower, the glass shimmered in the morning light. The building stood tall over the river, reflecting the sky like a calm mirror. Inside, the lobby was quiet except for the soft sound of footsteps and the gentle hum of the elevators. I greeted a few employees who nodded politely, unaware of the storm about to unfold upstairs. To them, I was the woman in the 21st floor office, important, yes, but still a mystery. Only a handful of executives understood that the tower itself existed because of my long nights, my risks, my sacrifices. As the elevator carried me upward, I steadied my breathing. I knew what I had to do, and I knew Nathan had no idea what was waiting for him. Last night, he stood outside the church treating me like someone disposable. Today, he would discover that I was the person who held his entire job in her hands. My office was quiet when I entered. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the river stretching across the city like a silver ribbon. My desk was organized as always, files neatly stacked, my laptop open, a cup of coffee steaming gently. I sat down in my chair and opened the folder Michael had prepared. Inside were the reports from Nathan's department, highlighting the mistakes he had made, the decisions he overlooked, and the project delays that had cost us $27,000. I wasn't angry about the money. It wasn't about that. It was about responsibility, effort, and respect, three things he had never learned to handle well. At exactly 9 a.m., there was a hesitant knock on my door. "Come in," I said, keeping my voice even. The door opened slowly, and Nathan stepped inside. The moment his eyes landed on me sitting behind the CEO's desk, everything in his face shifted. His skin went pale, his lips parted, and his posture collapsed as if the world had tilted beneath him. "But Brenda,"
he whispered, staring as though he was seeing a ghost. I folded my hands on the desk.
"Good morning, Nathan. Please sit." He didn't move at first. His eyes darted around the office, the large windows, the awards on the shelves, the framed contracts from clients in Berlin and New York, the company portrait hanging on the wall where my signature was printed boldly at the bottom. Finally, he lowered himself into the chair opposite me, trembling slightly. Why are you here?" he asked, his voice tight with disbelief. "This is the CEO's office," I offered a polite, calm smile. "It is." He stared at me, waiting for an explanation, waiting for me to say it was a joke or a misunderstanding. But I didn't bend. "I'm the CEO, Nathan." His mouth fell open. No words came out. His eyes filled with shock, then confusion, then something like regret, but too late for that. I could almost see the scenes replaying in his mind. The way he pointed at me yesterday, the way he spoke proudly about his job, the way he bragged about his role to our parents while dismissing me entirely. "I didn't know," he finally whispered. "No," I said softly. "You didn't care to know." He lowered his gaze to the desk, shame reddening his cheeks. The silence stretched between us for several long seconds before I slid the folder across the desk toward him. "Your department submitted the quarterly performance report last week," I said. "The errors inside this folder were overseen by you." He opened it slowly, his hands still shaking. As his eyes scanned the first page, his breath caught. I didn't mean..." "You cost this company $27,000, Nathan. And you ignored direct instructions from your supervisor. That kind of negligence cannot be overlooked." He straightened up suddenly, desperation flashing across his face. "I can fix it. Just give me a chance. I'll redo everything." I shook my head. "No, you won't get the chance." The words hung in the air like a silent hammer, heavy and final. He swallowed hard, panic filling his eyes. "Brenda, please," he said, leaning forward. "Yesterday was a mistake. I was stressed. Claire was upset. Our parents, everyone was pushing me, and I said things I shouldn't have. I didn't mean to." I lifted a hand to stop him. "This has nothing to do with yesterday. This is about your work, your choices, your lack of responsibility. Yesterday only showed me who you really are." Tears welled in his eyes, real ones, the kind I had never seen from him. He wasn't crying because he cared about losing me. He was crying because he realized the consequences of his own actions. "I helped you," I continued quietly. "I trained you. I fixed your resume. I gave you a chance when you had nothing. And you never even bothered to ask who supported you. You never bothered to see me." He covered his face with his hands. "I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry." But I had spent years listening to him apologize without changing. Years watching him take advantage of kindness because it was easy. I let out a slow breath.
"Nathan Collins," I said firmly, "you're fired." He dropped his hands, staring at me with a mixture of disbelief and heartbreak. "Brenda, please."
"Don't do this. I was wrong. I'll do better." This decision is final," I said. "You need to leave either mine today." A long silence followed. He didn't fight anymore. He didn't argue. Something inside him broke, not because he lost his job, but because he realized I was someone he had never respected, never cared to understand, and could no longer take for granted. For the first time in my life, I watched my older brother cry like a child. His shoulders shook, his voice cracked. And even then, even seeing him like that, I didn't forgive him. I felt sadness, yes, but forgiveness requires trust. And he had destroyed that door himself. As he stood and walked out of my office, I understood something deeply. Sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones you protected the longest. And sometimes the only way to stand up for yourself is to stop saving them. After Nathan walked out of my office with his shoulders lowered and his pride shattered, I stayed seated for several minutes, staring at the closed door. The silence in the room felt different that morning. Not heavy, not lonely. Instead, it felt like a cleansing quiet, a moment that marked the end of one chapter of my life and the start of another. Outside my window, Portland spread out like an old friend, its bridges arched over the river, its buildings reflecting the early sunlight, and its streets alive with people who had no idea how much this city had shaped me. I pressed my hand against the cool glass and took a long breath, letting myself absorb everything that had happened. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who arrived in this city years ago with $400 in her pocket, a second-hand laptop, and a dream that sounded impossible to everyone but her. I thought about the tiny studio apartment I once lived in, the kind with old wooden floors and a bathroom that leaked in the winter. Back then, I coded for hours every night, building the first pieces of a system I didn't even know would grow into an empire. I didn't have mentors or wealthy friends or any kind of family support. What I did have was determination, stubbornness, and the deep belief that I could build a life no one in my family had ever imagined. Now, I was sitting in the CEO's office of a company worth more than $12 million. A company I built quietly, honestly, and without stepping on others to rise. If there was anything I was proud of, it wasn't the money or the tower or the employees who sometimes whispered my name with admiration. It was the fact that I had created everything from nothing. I had done it without hurting people or begging for approval. I had done it with my own mind, my own heart, and my own patience. But my family never knew. They had always seen me through an old, blurry picture of who they thought I was. They assumed I was fine, assumed I didn't need support, assumed I was just there, reliable, invisible, a person who existed only to make their lives easier. Yesterday, when they threw me out of the wedding, they didn't break me. They simply reminded me of something important. I had outgrown the version of myself they still tried to treat like a child. Word traveled fast through Ethermind after I fired Nathan. Employees whispered in hallways, glanced at me with wide eyes, and spoke in low voices about the CEO personally dealing with a staff issue. Nobody knew the real story, and I didn't explain it to anyone. Some things belong to the heart and do not need to be displayed like trophies of pain. I wasn't interested in humiliating my brother. I wasn't interested in proving anything to anyone. The truth was that firing Nathan wasn't revenge. It was necessary. It was a decision that any CEO would have made. But for me, it held a deeper meaning. It was the moment I chose myself over someone who had used my kindness for too long. A week after the incident, I decided to give myself something I had never given before. A gift. Not a luxury item or a trip or something wrapped in ribbon. Something deeper. Something that symbolized peace, independence, and a fresh chapter. I bought a house in Windsor Hills, a quiet neighborhood along the river about 20 minutes outside of Portland. The house was bright white with wide windows and soft gray shutters. It had a long wraparound porch where the breeze moved gently in the afternoons. When I stepped inside for the first time, the air was clean and open, filled with sunlight that poured through the windows like warm water. I paid $650,000 in cash, and I didn't regret a single dollar. The house wasn't huge, but it was perfect for me. It had a reading nook in the corner of the living room, a small fireplace made of old stone, and a kitchen with cool marble counters. In the back, there was a yard framed with tall trees, and beyond it, the sound of the river flowing softly. The realtor, a woman named Elizabeth Harding, told me the place had a calm heart. I believed her. When I walked through the rooms, I felt something in me settle, like my soul was finally stretching its legs after years of being cramped inside old expectations. Most evenings I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, sometimes lemon, sometimes mint, and listened to the wind moving through the trees. The peace of Windsor Hills was different from the energy of Portland. It didn't push me, it didn't demand anything, it didn't ask me to prove myself, it simply let me breathe. Sometimes, as the sun dipped behind the houses, I thought about Nathan, about Claire, about my parents. They still didn't know the truth about my work. They didn't know I owned either mind. They didn't know why Nathan lost his job. They didn't know how much I had done for him over the years. They didn't know how many times I had protected him. Part of me wondered if I should tell them, if I should reveal everything and let the pieces fall where they may. But I didn't, not because I was angry. Anger fades. Distance, however, is something that grows naturally when you choose peace over constant pain. I needed time to rediscover myself without the weight of their expectations. I needed space to become the woman they never allowed me to fully be. My story, I realized, was not about revenge. It was not about proving anyone wrong or winning some invisible war. My story was about knowing my worth, claiming my voice, and finally choosing myself. When I sat in my office the day after the wedding and looked at Nathan with steady eyes, saying the words, "You're fired," I wasn't acting out of anger. I was standing in a truth I had earned. For so long, I helped others rise. I supported them, guided them, lifted them, even when they never lifted me in return. But now, for the first time in my life, I understood something powerful and simple. It was my turn to rise. My turn to protect myself, my turn to stand fully in my own light. And I knew sitting there in my new home, hearing the wind whisper through the trees, that I was becoming the woman I was always meant to be.